We have mics back? Oh, okay. We have mics! That thing about detecting the MAC address and knowing the vendor, that's a quick clue that this is also a printer. And a thing about the way I structure usually most of my stuff that I showed, it's a screenshot of the command line in Unix. What was that? Oh, I thought I heard something else a second. Anything that's in black is just the command prompt itself. Red is a command that you enter. Anything in green is what that command outputs. So if you remember that color scheme, you know what's what. But pretty much red is just what the stuff that you typed in, and everything else is generated for you. Here's another example of mapping RICO 7. You'll notice a lot of the same ports open on it as on JetDirect. Now, a quick nmap note. Anything before 3.9, if it scans port 9100, 9100, the raw printer port, is pretty dumb. It'll pretty much try to print anything you send to it. So you'll get garbage print jobs with lines like this on each page, and it'll print off like a few hundred pages. For a while there, you know, if someone used Nmap to scan your entire facility, you might see that kind of garbage coming out your printer. It happens. Luckily, I asked Fedora about it, and he made some extra functionality in 3.9 that basically, by default, it does not do the service probe on port 9100. It considers it an unsafe port to do that on. Yay, Fedora. All right, another way you can find network printers is use different SNMP tools. You can use HP's WebAdmin. I think it's clunky, but it's the only one that's currently supported and has features you're not going to find in some of the older tools. One of the older tools is HP JetAdmin for Windows. You can just do a quick scan of the network and find all sorts of network printers that are out there. These particular names, if you use NetBIOS, you should be able to resolve them. If you just said, if you were on Windows and you said ping and that name, it should resolve the name for you. If you have Samba running on your Linux box, I believe it's going to resolve that name as well. Another tool you can use is Smart Device Manager. This is something that RICO 7 makes. You can scan an entire IP range. It'll tell you what kind of printer it's hooked up to it. You can find out its IP address, whether or not it needs new supplies and so forth, and a bunch of other information about that particular network printer. I also like using Foundstone's SNS scan. It's another SNMP tool. And when you scan a certain IP range, it quickly tells you what kind of device you're dealing with, and you can search through that for network printers. And finally, SoftPerfect's NetScan I really dig. And it can do the same thing with SNMP. And also you can use it for finding SMB shares on a network. That's what I use for finding rogue file shares. Oh, something I didn't mention in an earlier slide. Protocols I'm not discussing is stuff like IPX and how you print with IPX, because quite frankly, I don't have a lot of experience with it. Some modern RICO 7s actually have SMB printers built in, where you can use it as a printer share, like if it's a Windows box. Haven't messed with that. If anybody wants to mess with that and give me more information, send it to me. I'll give you full credit and post it into the network printing page.
Small question?
Yes?
What about JetAdmin, HP JetAdmin?
HP JetAdmin?
Yeah. It searches also network and will give you results about Xerox printers.
That one? HP JetAdmin?
Yeah, I didn't see you mention it.
Yeah, HP JetAdmin will do that, and they no longer support HP JetAdmin. You have to go find some place to download it. The modern one is like HP Web JetAdmin or something like that, and you have to install it on a box and you access it over a built-in web server. And I think it's a little clunky, but you can do the firmware update and everything else from it. So it has all the features. I just don't like it because it's clunky. You have to install it. It's not as easy to use as to me as just plain old JetAdmin. And also, finally, you can Google for printers. Here's a few common search strings. One of these I came up myself. Most of them I got from johnny.ihackstuff.com. He has a few other ones you might want to check out. But if you used any of these particular search strings, you're going to find some printers in Google. This basically tells, find me web pages with this in the title, containing this text. In URL, I want this particular string to appear in the URL, and so forth. And this is a great way to find network printers. If you have a facility, like let's say you work at a corporation, you may want to do a quick search of your particular corporation's network for this by specifying the site : IBM.com or whatever, to see if there's any printers you might have open and accessible. More likely you may not, but it's worth giving a shot. Controlling printers. There's several different ways you can control these printers. A lot of times people just hook up the little external JetDirect box, so the internal one, they don't configure a password on it at all, and you can just get in and actually configure everything from a built-in web interface. But the way you normally control these printers, at least the JetDirects, is via a web page, via Telnet, via various SNMP tools, and if it's an old JetDirect box, this and this are kind of the same because all the web page does is serve up a little Java applet that uses SNMP. And finally, Hijetter, which sends certain commands over to port 9100 to do odd tasks. A little bit of password info for you. On the older JetDirects, the Telnet password and the device password you might use for the web page or SNMP tools and so forth is different. It's not necessarily the same, which confuses the hell out of people. It confused the hell out of me the first time I ran into it. On newer ones, it is the same. And on newer JetDirects, if you run into it asking you for a username, old ones don't ask you for the username at all. New ones, root, admin, administrator, and supervisor are all equivalent. And if it doesn't have password set, I believe it just lets you straight on in on the new ones too. A lot of people don't bother to set a password. It's a good idea to set a password. Also, since it's Telnet, there's some security problems there because you could sniff the connection if you're on the same LAN and find the password. And if it's the web browser, you can sniff the password and find it. Luckily, very modern JetDirects actually have a web service built in that you can use SSL over. A little bit more information I just gave you. Another way you can obtain the password, you can reset the password if you have physical access to it by basically holding down the test button, unplugging it, plugging it back in, letting the light flash a few times, and then letting it go. However, there's this really bad vulnerability that older JetDirects have, and a lot of people never upgrade the firmware in their JetDirects that you can use to pull the password off of them. Use SNMP-GET from a Linux or a BSD box. I imagine you can do it in OS X as well. I'm telling you, use version 1 of the SNMP protocol, the community string public, the IP address network printer, and this particular MIB. That gives me this hex string back out. If you go ahead and decode that hex string in ASCII, 50 equals P, 41 equals A, so on and so forth, what you get is password equals 108. What is first part before the equal sign? Whatever you get is the actual password of that particular JetDirect box. And you can use all of the network as long as you know the community name. And most people don't bother to change the community name from public. Yes?
What printer is that with?
This particular test model was a 170X JetDirect. I don't remember the particular revision it was. And the bad thing about the 170X, you can't upgrade the firmware. This is stuck like this for fucking ever.
So it's out there in deployment, or is it super, super old?
Oh, no, it's a lot of them. See, that was like one of the first lower-end JetDirects that anybody could buy for cheap. I think you can find them. I think the average price I saw...
So if I bought a JetDirect maybe 2 years ago...
It might very well be this one.
Okay.
Because they're still out there and you can still buy them.
Okay, right.
And you can't upgrade the firmware, which sucks. But that's how... It's pretty dumb. So you can get in, easily pull out the device password, get in and configure it. Also, if you can't use public, try the community string internal or private. It's been reported to me, in my test, if you change the community string, you can't get in unless you know the community string. However, I've had reports that on some JetDirect boxes, even if the community name is changed, you can still get in using the community name internal, regardless. Common community strings, which I just covered, public, internal. I haven't actually tested this, but it's rumored it will work on some JetDirects even if you change it, and private. Website management. Here you see me pulling up the pane in the little Java applet. Older JetDirects use a little Java applet to serve up. New ones actually seem to send the communications in band. But this basically allows me to configure things like IP address, what protocols to use. A good security idea is probably any protocol you don't use. If you're only using TCP/IP, turn off everything else. No need to have it out there. It's only going to cause more network chatter. And of course, while you're in there, you want to enable a password and make sure everything's configured right. I'll tell you why you want to enable a password later on, because there's things people can do with these settings to totally mess up your LAN. Telnet. I'm going to give you a quick example of some things you can do with Telnet to configure your box. You can type in a quotation mark at the command prompt of most JetDirects and get more information on what things you can set. But here I log off a password called this pass. I tell it allow 0, which basically means allow any IP address to attach. One of the few security measures you really have on these JetDirects, and I imagine other network printers, is you can restrict what IPs can talk to them. When you do this, that means no SNMP tools can talk to it, nobody can try to print to it, only that one particular IP address. Yeah, you can spoof the IP address, that has some other complications, but it's at least an extra level of security. What you'll generally want to do, especially if you're using some kind of print tracking software to be sure how many print jobs people are sending, is to set up for only the IP address of your CUP server or your Windows print server can talk to that particular JetDirect box. That'll also keep people from outside the network, if your firewall doesn't block all the right ports, from being able to connect to that particular machine and control it. This basically says, allow anybody in. Then I connect, and I tell it to allow this particular IP address, as well as anything that matches this IP address with this network mask. So everything that has an IP address of 192.168.20. something. Then I list out which ones I set, I quit, and it saves the settings. And now only this particular IP address and all the IP addresses in this range should be able to talk to my JetDirect box. That's a good idea to keep you from doing various denial of service attacks and other tricks I'm going to be showing you later on. Here's links to all those SNMP tools I told you about earlier. The SNMP Git I was showing you, that's part of the Net SNMP tool package you should be able to get for any Linux distribution, any BSD distribution, and I imagine pretty much any Unix-like operating system. Okay, next tool I'm going to show you is Hijacker. Hijacker is a neat little tool. There's a command line equivalent. This is the web page where you can get both of these. Basically, Hijacker is the Windows GUI. PFT is a command line version that you can compile in Unix-like operating systems as well as Windows, I believe. And you can use it to configure all sorts of things about that printer. One fun thing to do, did someone ask a question? Oh, sorry. One thing that's fun to do is set the default language to check, or something along that lines. And rebooting the system doesn't change it. The only way to change it again is to use something like Hijacker and send the right PGL commands to set it back, which can be really annoying to people. Even unplugging it, plugging it back in, unless maybe you left the power off for a long amount of time, it's still going to be in check.
Can't you go through the menu system?
Unfortunately, at least what I played with in the menu system, no.
Really?
Not to mention the menu system is going to be in check at that point. So maybe I'm failing because the menu system is in check. Maybe there is a place, but the only way I was able to get it out was a Hijacker. So if you have a Czech friend, call them over. Simple printer tricks. A lot of stuff is useless, but it'll give you ideas on how to play with printers. Printing an HTTP GET request, printing with Telnet, setting a printer's LCD screen with Telnet, and zombie scan. All right.